appreciate people coming out tonight, and so I'm not going to run through too many of our announcements. Elizabeth Hurd is called in sick, and I was going to ask her to do a report on Pioneer Village, but the biggest news out there is they are going to start work on restrooms in the village in June. So we're actually going to have modern restrooms in Pioneer Village coming up, our work will start in June. Asked Tom on Sons of Confederate Veterans. I know things are still continuing with you guys, so can you give us a quick report, Tom?
It's been extremely busy year.
Y'all sign?
We had Chalk Bluff at the beginning part of the month, and of course, all of our other little events going, but what we've got coming up is tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning, there's going to be 2 sesquicentennial markers in Mountain View placed.
Okay.
And then we have a sesquicentennial event in Shreveport, Louisiana, Saturday. There's a event coming up the 5th of June, and it's in Garland City, Arkansas. It's kind of like the Pioneer Village, but it's more Civil War related. It's how the soldiers and everything.
And if I remember right, Garland City is way down close to Texarkana.
It's close to Camden, yeah.
Oh, close to Camden. Okay, I'm in the wrong southern, but the wrong corner.
And we have, we did a ROTC down here at BB for one of the cadets down there,
Okay.
scholarship. So,
You
medal
guys,
certificate.
you stay on the go, and one of the things we're going to close out tonight with will be kind of a survey of the markers we put up in the county, and Tom has been on hand every time, so we really appreciate the supports of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. Does anyone have any particular announcements they want to bring up to the group? The only other one I think of right offhand that I kind of like to mention, I don't know how many of you know Amy Burton, but she's the director for Main Street Searcy. Been active there for, I guess that program's been going on at least 8 years now. And so she has received a grant, and they've started work on windows, doors, and some roof work on the Legion Hut, where our headquarters is. And Nancy, Amy's done the work for that, and we appreciate it. So if you happen to run into her, say thank you, because she's really done the legwork for us.
Do you know how old the Legion Hut is?
We looked at today, 1934. It's a WPA building.
I went to a third function there in 1969. A third function, you were allowed to have 3 parties a year.
Oh, okay. Now, what group, was this a school group or an
This
organization?
was from Harding College.
Oh, from Harding.
And they had social clubs, and a young man invited me to his social club's banquet, and they served Italian food, and all the boys pretended to be the waiters.
Oh, my goodness. Sounds exciting. Well, we have just, of course, the Legion has not been used much in recent years. And I think there's some plans to try to get it back a little more active. And the new work, the windows and doors, because it is a National Register property, will be either rebuilt or replaced. The look will be kept on it. And so we're kind of excited for that to be happening. Well, I'm going to do this one other thing. Memorial Day, and this may be asking too much, but I thought of on Memorial Day. If you have any names of particular people that you think of on Memorial Day, I'm going to just ask you to maybe raise your hand and just mention their name, and I'm going to lead off with it. I come from Garner, Arkansas, where I grew up, and there in World War II, Albert Porfer lost his life over in Europe, and then Korean War, Robert or Bobby Mitchell, and those guys passed on. And I just wondered if anybody else had any particular names you thought of, that just share the names with the group if you can, or if you don't mind, if you think of anyone in particular.
Well, he had a brother, Robert Ed Rogers, who was in World War II and the Korean War.
Oh.
And he died in, what, 86?
Who are you talking about,
Your
Ed?
brother,
Ed?
86, when he died.
He was 68 years old when he died.
We have a World War II
I'd like to
veteran.
talk a little bit about the war one at a time, whenever you have time, but not tonight.
With weather, we're gonna ask you to put you on hold, Mr. Rogers, but we do appreciate your being here, and Mr. Jennings, World War II and Korea. I didn't know you were double till just now reading your cap.
Both of them, yeah.
In both of them, so,
And all of my prayers, I never forget to say, have peace throughout the world.
yeah,
There was nothing pretty about it, was there?
yeah.
That's-
Well, we certainly owe a debt. Tonight's program, since it is Memorial Day, and it's kind of hard to bring someone in, decided we'd run through the markers, memorials here in White County. And so actually what we're going to do is simply present the memorials or markers that are in White County that we know of, and we may have missed something, and if we did, would love for you to share it with us, either during the program or afterwards. And we did them in order, so Scott, he's ready to go. He even has our names up there in lights, I tell you. And so I decided, I got curious, what is the oldest marker in White County that memorializes?
I tell you what, since you push the arrow up and down, so you don't have to take your glasses off, do this, I'll sit here and do that.
Okay, okay. And then you're going, when it's your turn to talk, you're going to train me to push the button?
Sure.
Okay, we got it made. So, over at Evergreen Cemetery, there is a marker that is the Grand Army of the Republic marker. This is the Judge Sonia Elementary School in the background, Neburon Street. The marker was put up in 1894. Grand Army of the Republic, that's the Union. Only, as far as I know, 2 Union memorials in Arkansas. The other one is up in the northwest corner of the state. Oh, there's 3? Okay, where's the one beside northwest corner in here? Do you know offhand?
I don't know, but it's on that side too, it wasn't.
Is it? Okay. So unusual to have a Grand Army of the Republic marker, but as you may know, Judge Sonia was settled after the Civil War. A lot of Northerners did come down to White County. That was kind of the beginning of our strawberry industry to some degree, because they did more truck farming. And so this marker is the first memorial or marker that I know of put up in White County honoring the Union troops. And there's about 10 Union veterans buried in the plot around the marker. There's one World War II vet buried over here, and I'm assuming he was killed during the war. I don't know that for sure, but this plot was reserved for Union veterans. Kind of a unique part of White County being a little unique from the rest of Arkansas. The next marker that was put up by subscription, we're all familiar with, and of course that is the Confederate monument on the corner of the square. I'm assuming everybody has seen it. Put up in 1917, and it was, again, funds raised. It says on the marker by public subscription, but at that time there were still a lot of Confederate veterans living, and also the United Daughters of the Confederacy was, I think, had a hand in it. And like both of them, I'm sure many people are involved in fundraising. And so those are the 2 earliest monuments. And then nothing happens in the county till 1934. And in 1934, there is another, can you back up just one? Picking on my help here. Uh-oh, we got them in the wrong order then. Okay, go on, I'm sorry. In 1934, there was a Robert Cannon chapter of the United Daughters of the War of 1812. And this chapter was made up of some ladies, apparently from both Beebe and Searcy. And they put up a marker, and this is at Stony Point Cemetery, which is about 2 miles. Actually, I guess it's in Beebe city limits anymore, but Stony Point is the old predecessor of Beebe, the town. And so this marker was put up, and it says it marks the St. Genevieve Trail and the old military road, north and south.
You can kind of see the cemetery in the background.
Yeah, oh yeah, some of the stones. This marker shouldn't be there because in the this marker originally was on the same rock, and it was down Highway 60, on present day Highway 64, and 64 was modernized about 10 years ago, or widened and leveled. And but even before that, this marker was down in a gully off the old highway. At some point, the marker came off the rock. I don't know who it was, but they brought the marker in to Floyd Presley, who was kind of our mainstay for many years in the Historical Society. So one Sunday afternoon, about a dozen of us from the Historical went down to BB, waded through briars and brambles down the hill, and reinstalled the marker on the rock. About 10 years later, they're making plans to widen Highway 64. At that time, I thought, okay, are they paying attention to the marker? Because the widening was going to take that area. Judge Parrish, our county judge at that time, on very short notice, got a county crew down there. They picked up the marker, and it was about to get covered. They'd already cleared right away. Picked it up, moved it a mile north. We thought, where is a public place that's not too far away where it'll be protected? So the marker was moved to the corner of where it is now, which is within sight of this road they're commemorating. I could spend about an hour, or Scott could, either one, talking about the road, but we're going to pass on that today. We're just letting you know the marker's there.
I think we need to say that they put the marker up on the Searcy to Little Rock Road from the 1830s to, well past the Civil War. But it's not the old military road, which was the territorial period road. It's a few miles further to the west. So their intentions were good. They marked a road. They marked an important long-term use road, but it was not the old military road. It was simply the county road that connected Searcy to Little Rock at the time.
So sometimes later information, there's updates. That's not the first time in history that something's had to be rewritten. The next one was also put up, what happened to our,
Why you keep saying, oh?
because we're supposed to have the Spanish land grant next. There we go. You go out Davis Drive. I really like the other picture best. Gate 1, livestock exhibitors and passes only. Searcy Landing Road, which dead ends very quickly anymore. Behind it, there's a rock. On the rock, now we can go to the next one. Again, by the Robert Cannon chapter, marking the Spanish land grant to a native of France, John Lafayette, and no, they don't put the law on it, John Fayac, but you also find Lafayette and Lafayette. Yeah, Labas, given prior to 1800 and patented by him in 1805. 2 Spanish land grants in White County, the other one being Georgetown. This is close to the corner of the land grant, and have you ever noticed on White County Hospital how that diagonal line goes through there on the property? That's an edge of the other edge of the Spanish land grant. It goes on down by Riverview School is just outside. Matter of fact, the division between River Oaks Estates and Riverview School is the land grant property. Again, we could spend an hour just on that topic. But anyway, that's the next 2 markers from the 1930s. There's one more put up in the 1930s. And I imagine you've all seen it when you go pay your taxes or assess. Over here on the corner, the marker. This was put up as an Arkansas Centennial marker. Arkansas Centennial was in 1836. You look at the marker closely, it was put up in 1838. Like other projects, sometimes they don't happen quite as fast as you expect. But next one, Scott. This is simply saying in 1837, 2 years after the creation of White County, the site of the town of Searcy was laid off as the permanent seat of justice of the county. And I have wondered if maybe this was the number, and then you got F13. I wondered what the numbering system means. And I looked, 1836 Arkansas Centennial Commission, Arkansas History Commission, and I am convinced that's an 8 on the end. So that's why I say it was 2 years late being put up. But I tried every way to make that into a 6 or anything else. Anyway, next marker from another marker from the 30s.
It is put up during the Depression, and so that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, Depression era. So, okay, the next marker I can find is 1981.
So we jump.
I'm sorry, 86. So we jumped 50 years before there's another marker put up. And this, and when you go up Highway 16 and turn onto Highway 305, almost immediately you come to Snowden Road, which dead ends. And there are two markers that are marking the, I shouldn't use the word explosion, the fire in the Titan II missile silo that, just lost my year that happened, 1965. Yeah, because we're in the 50th anniversary this year.
August 9th.
Yeah, August 9th, 1965. And our July program, Gary Lay, who was a young man, was one of two survivors of the fire, will give our program in July. And so it's going to be, I think, he gave us a program about 15 years ago. So I think this, as far as history goes, will be the most significant programs we have. But the two markers were placed, and I don't know if they were, I think they were placed at different times. This one was obviously placed in 1986, memorial in honor of the 53 men killed, and then here's the listing of the men. And a lot of them did not live here in the county. And, but anyway, that was the next marker place that we know of. From there, I don't have pictures, but we have the different war memorials. McRae put up a memorial, and their idea was to name all veterans, whether killed in action or not. BB followed, Bradford has one, so there's several memorial walls. Now those really aren't historic markers because nothing historic happened there, but it is remembering the veterans. So with that, I don't have pictures of them. That was happening in the 1980s. And then, as I mentioned, or 1990s for the memorial walls, I'm sorry. And then the Historical Society decided that it was time to start making some markers. The next marker, Scott, I hope, yes, the courthouse. And this is a view from the Security Bank side, and the next picture, Scott, will be right here on the porch. And then the very next picture shows what happened. The courthouse for Jefferson County, Pine Bluff, burned. And with the article it said was this is the oldest courthouse in Arkansas. And it'd be still, and so I thought, well, if they burned, we're close to them on age, so got to looking, could we be the oldest now? But this led to all sorts of questions, and I learned a lot. But in the process, we're the oldest functioning. Now there's older courthouses, like Old Washington, Arkansas has a courthouse that goes back to 1836, but is no longer used as a courthouse. So yeah, that's why we got to use the word functioning. There's other buildings around, and the Wolf House, the log house up at Norfolk, was supposedly a courthouse, 1828, I believe. And so we have to throw that word functioning in. And but we wanted to honor that. So the Historical Society, this is the first marker that we put up in May 13th of 1989. And
I like to say that it's the oldest courthouse still being used for the purpose for which it was originally built.
Good way to put it. And from there, the Historical Society kind of got on a roll. And so that was 1989. In 1991, we're back to this old military road that we've studied for years, sign, and this is directly across some of you know where the community of Mount Pisgah is, and some of you won't. But Mount Pisgah is a rural area south of Latona, and two churches there, still Methodist and Baptist, and this marker is directly across the road from the Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, county road. It is paved now, it was gravel at the time we put it up. And one of the oldest routes into Arkansas was the Southwest Trail, which came from St. Louis. And then when we used that Southwest Trail, we didn't realize we were using a 20th century term. Actually, we should have used the term Old Military Road there, which came from St. Louis and continued southwesterly through Arkansas to Fulton on Red River. It was 1831, President Andrew Jackson signed an act of Congress to improve the road. The old trail then became the military road and passed this location. And that's been a project of Scott's and mine for years, working on this road.
And by the time the Civil War comes along, civil Union officers do use the phrase old military road when they're referring to this road.
But this is the second marker the Historical Society puts up. Next one, Scott. Chloe Presley, as a lot of you know, did lots of genealogy. and with that, your cemetery work, and she was interested where the oldest graves in Oak Grove Cemetery is. Now, Oak Grove is a historic cemetery for Searcy over here on Moore Street. And the graves are this, I don't know what, well, this is what's in here now. I think it's a welding shop or something, but you're on the, pardon me, on the east side and more back from Moore Street. And so let's go back ahead, Scott. Listing of the earliest graves. Most of these stones are still there but broken up. Other side, Scott, please. This is the location of the oldest marked graves in this cemetery when listed in 1968, and we put the stone up in 1992 just to kind of mark that section of the cemetery. Following that, in the same year, 1992, go ahead, Scott, the gazebo at the park, we wanted to commemorate that the springs at the park were the reason that Searcy's laid out where it is. We had this marker mounted more or less flush. It's real easy for people to stand on it. It's back and it's covered, no rain ever hits it. It looks terrible, as you can see. I thought after looking at it the other day, we probably ought to see about getting it up, refurbished, and maybe getting it on a pole out somewhere, because we did it with good intentions, but in hindsight, it wasn't the best mounting in the world.
They're right there. When I first looked at that, I thought it was wet, but that is some kind of chemical cleaner has dripped down onto it.
You think from the rocks, cleaning the rocks clean or something?
Yeah, that's because it's not wet.
When
Yes.
Searcy developed around the springs, the gentleman Searcy was named after, was it always pronounced Searcy? Because so many people try to say Searcy.
As far as I know, it's always been Searcy. He was Richard Searcy. He was a district
Lawyer in Batesville.
judge from Batesville. And I don't know anybody ever, I mean, locally, it's always been Searcy as far as I know. It does look like Searcy, you know. You get the same thing being from Hot Springs, Percy, Arkansas. Looks like Piercy. And it's pronounced, there they pronounce it both ways. Some people, but there have been a lot of people moving that area too. And some will say Percy and some say Piercy. So I don't know what their old pronunciation was. I can't answer it. So,
And we do admit to an error on this.
yeah, help us out.
It says the title was cleared in 1880 and Israel Moore gave the land for the use of the public forever. But that should say 1850.
Yeah, it was cleared in 1850, so I don't know how. I'm wondering if we even caught that at the time it was put in. After Scott pointed that out, I thought, that sounds like new information, but I know it's 1850s, because that's when Supreme Court settled that. There were several claims from War of 1812 veterans to the land. And it was just it's very well written up in Dr. Muncy's book.
We have a lady here at Harding Place, her last name is Easter, and she is directly connected to the guy that settled her.
Israel Moore.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We put an article about her in the
Right.
newspaper.
Let's see, White Sulphur Springs we've got covered. Okay, the next one is really a memorial. It's not a historic site, but and this is the article in the newsletter about adding names on, but the Hank Fulbright, who is not in good health at all now, who's out at River Oaks, was a member of the American Legion and member of the Historical Society, and he said, I'd like to see us put up a memorial of them listing all of those who actually died while in active duty in World War I, World War II, or Korean War. Now, Vietnam wasn't included because there's already a Vietnam marker on the other corner of the court square. And so the Historical Society gave the first $500, and then a member of the Historical Society had another $500. So we gave the first $1,000, and Eddie Best, who was real active at that time, really worked. So even though the title really belonged to the American Legion posts, we still kind of claim some credit on it and want to keep an interest in this particular memorial. It includes everybody in the county. Now the other markers like McRae, BB, they list all veterans. I mean, I could be on there. So but this is the ones who gave the ultimate sacrifice. So if you're around, your name ain't gonna be on there. So, but anyway, a project of the Historical Society. Scott, do you want to pick up from there?
This is a marker in the West Point Cemetery. After the Whitney Lane book, what we call the Whitney Lane book, the Severe and Bloody Fight book, was published in 1996. In 1999, I think, Mark Christ of the Historic Preservation Program in Little Rock notified us that they'd had some money turned back from another grant that didn't use all their money, and Dr. Dan Davidson here in Searcy, his son was reading the Whitney Lane book and found out that there was a doctor named Tapscott who was killed at the Battle of Whitney's Lane, and his gravestone in the West Point Cemetery was broken. And so Dr. Davidson raised funds, mostly out of his own pocket, but he did have some other contributors, to put a large obelisk marker on Tapscott's grave, and we piggybacked off of that to be able to get the matching money from the state to put this marker up in the West Point Cemetery, which is entitled, it says the Little Red River Valley.
Next one's closer, if you
And
want.
then West Point in the Civil War. This is a fiberglass panel marker. It has the sheet of paper is embedded between two layers of fiberglass. You get the wonderful opportunity to put pictures and maps and drawings on there. The downside is it is fiberglass and it does deteriorate over time. We want, well, it's been up there now 16 or 17 years. And it's still in actually pretty good shape, all things considered. We do have another copy of it in storage. So whenever this one finally gets too nasty, we can replace it with another one. So we've got another one ready to go. But it just tells the story of West Point in the Civil War.
And it's the only marker we have that is made of the plexiglass in the county. Back up one, if you don't mind, Scott, because something that's neat here. If you ever driving down 36 toward Georgetown's where you're going, but as you enter West Point on the left, you can actually see this easily from the road. And I don't think I've ever seen it when there wasn't flowers by it. It's just always, I don't know who keeps it decorated, but someone does. And I always appreciate that part. You see they've also been doing some cleaning at the cemetery from behind there. Okay, next two. Okay, Scott, you want to talk about this one or want me to? This.
Crow Cemetery is, if you know where the John Deere tractor place is, as you're entering Kensett from Searcy, there's Whitney Lane, and at the end of Whitney Lane, you come to the railroad tracks, and right across the railroad tracks is Crow Cemetery. Before Kensett was even Kensett, there was a road leading from Searcy to West Point, and at the time it went by the south edge of this cemetery, but later that road was abandoned and graves placed on the south side of the road, so there are graves on both sides of what was that old roadbed, and it's a pretty deep wagon roadbed. It's at least as deep as this counter here. But there are graves out there, and this whole thing you're looking at, this is now the south half of the cemetery. The north half is kept well mowed and well maintained by the black community in the Kensett area, but the center part behind this marker there contains both black and white, going back prior to the Civil War. This entire area was heavily overgrown. I mean, just absolute jungle when Chloe Presley and others went out there to try to record the information from the tombstones in the 1960s, and
They couldn't even find all of it, it was just a
Couldn't find them.
real tangle. I mean, occasionally you get into that where there's so much brush and briars and, just overgrowth that you fight your way every step.
In 2004, my father led an effort to clean up this cemetery. This is about, it's 2 acres in size, the part that needs to be cleaned up. There's 2 acres, and then 2 acres that is being maintained. It's 2 acres in size, and it's rough. It's rough, and there's lots of rocks out there that were probably gravestone markers, but have fallen over the years, but they're just rocks. In 2005, my father passed away, but and what I have just tried to do since then is mainly just spray it, trying to just keep the grass down to maintain access to it, keep it from going back into a jungle again. And that's the marker honors the effort. But before I go to the next one, I will tell you that in the process, we discovered that approximately right over here in this general area, Bill was standing out there. We were standing out there toward the end of the day in 2005, and Bill kind of rocked back and forth.
Started rocking.
His feet started, he started rocking, and then as we began clearing it off,
Clearing out leaves.
what we discovered was General Dandridge McRae. 2 of his brothers were buried there, and but the markers were just absolutely deteriorated. I mean, they were just almost unreadable. In fact, I think we could read one. We could read the first name on one, but on the other one, we only got the McRae part. But anyway, his brothers are buried there, and we have recently determined, with the help of Alan Thompson of Craig Grove Battlefield, that the McRae brothers both did serve at least through March of 1862. So we're going to make an attempt anyway to get some markers put on their graves.
Another project for the Historical Society.
And then this just explains that, it kind of explains the history of how the parts of the cemetery were added. And we were able to get that from Mr. Mobley next door. On his property abstract, it told when sections of the cemetery were added as time went by. So we were able to put that on the marker.
Memorial, this is Latona, Veterans Memorial from that area. And Diane Poe was on our board, and Diane really hasn't been able, she lost her dad and then her husband very quickly here about not too many months back. And but when her dad was getting World War II veteran, she wanted to have a memorial for the veterans of that area. So we again gave some initial money to help get the fund started, and then Diane picked up the ball and ran with it. It's really a pretty little memorial. As you go through Latona, it's right where Latona has City Hall and Fire Department and Park all together. So you pull in there and you're at the memorial. That's on Highway 310, and you really can't miss it as you go by.
I would like to add, I'm sorry to back up on you, I would like to add that this marker was made possible entirely by donations in memory of my father in the effort to clean out the cemetery. The Historical Society acted as the pass-through, but the Historical Society didn't directly contribute money. This was entirely financed by contributions after my father.
Okay, moving from Latona, Scott, this is still your ball game.
All right. This is in the fall of 2010, in October of 2010, we put up the first of 7 Civil War Central Centennial markers. This one is entitled Action at Whitney's Lane, and this is in front of the Whitney Lane Family Worship Center, which is right across the street from well, kind of catty-cornered across the street from the John Deere tractor dealership I mentioned earlier, and also, brain freeze.
I want to listen to you.
Brain freeze. Well, Bill and, Fern, this is some of Bill and Fern's growing up area, that's where I was trying to get. This was, probably farmland when y'all were growing up, right? But anyway, the marker is actually where we think the road went in this direction, during the time of the Civil War. This just tells what happened. 100 Texas Rangers and 50 local men attacked 17th Missouri Infantry, 22 killed, 33 wounded. And after this event, the Yankees start backing up toward Batesville, and then they end up going down the east side of the White River and on over to Helena. But their goal was Little Rock until this happened. And we were fortunate in our research to be able to find, we believe, the names of every man killed on that day. It's called, obviously, this is not a giant battle. This is a small one, which is why it's called action instead of battle marker. But it's still pretty neat, though, to be able to get the name of every man that was killed, and we're highly confident that we did. As you can see, there's 22 Federal and only 4 Confederate. In 2012, we put up the first of 4 markers. This one to me kind of is one of the most fascinating because most people are not aware that there was salt production in White County. This may be White County's first industry, other than farming, of course. Between Ball Knob and Augusta, there are about 50 square miles of land where the ground, in the time of emergency, the groundwater is saline enough to be able to get the water and boil it and leave the salt. And the Confederates had a salt works, which were these large kettles that they had to build fires under and boil the water away to leave the salt. And the Yankees managed to find it in 1864 and destroyed the kettles. The one kettle that is in Pioneer Village, we believe, is one of the...
Go to your next one, they can see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, took a better picture of it, I'm sorry. The one kettle that's at Pioneer Village that has a pretty good sized hole in it and appears to have lots of bullet marks all around the outside of it. We think that is one of those kettles. There are a few kettles still remaining in private hands in the area. But after the war was over with, the railroads and steamboats bring in cheap salt from other locations, and so there was no need for a continued production. But we do think that Joe Shelby was responsible. He's a well-known character in Arkansas military history. Joe Shelby was the one that was responsible for getting those heavy iron kettles to the location in the Liberty Valley area where the salt works was located. We don't know the exact spot, but it may have moved around.
We hope that was in the safest location. The previous picture showed the Ball Knob Police Department right behind the sign. So we think that's the most secure location we have for one of the signs.
I won't name any names, but one individual who owns a kettle, we tried to get him to donate it so that we could put the kettle up right next to the sign. And he said, "No, boys, you ain't getting my kettle." And we said, "Well, it's going to be at the police department." And he said, "That's what worries me most." All right. The second marker we put up was at Searcy Landing.
River Oaks Clubhouse in the background.
Yes, all the houses in River Oaks are mostly now on the high ground. There's a few down there on the low ground, but that is the clubhouse in the background, and Mr. House, who is the owner of the River Oaks Golf Course, chose that spot, and it's a good spot. He did a good job picking the location, because everyone who comes in there has to see that marker as they come by.
The next one, so you look at the market a little closer while you're talking.
Yeah, Searcy Landing was a steamboat stop with cotton warehouses before the war. May 9th, 1862, Colonel Osterhaus's 3rd Division built a bridge across the Little Red River. Camping here as they threatened Little Rock. They stayed several weeks, battling with Confederates. And in August of in August of 63, the USS Cricket captured the steamboats Kaskaskia and Tom Thug at Searcy Landing and destroyed General John Marmaduke's pontoon bridge that crossed the river here. This marker is actually a two-sided marker, two different paragraphs.
I didn't get the other side, Scott.
You didn't get the other side?
No.
Okay, well, the other side just explains that there was guerrilla activity later in the war, and there was actually a pontoon bridge, not true pontoons, but logs covered over with planks to make bridges. For 3 different, 62, 63, and 64, there were bridges built, temporary bridges built across the river there at Searcy Landing. But that is the farthest place that steamboats could come up the river was Searcy Landing. You get to West Point year round, you get to Searcy Landing 3 to 6 months a year. Now we're moving to Oak Grove Cemetery, where General Dandridge McRae is buried. This is on Moore Street. And fortunately, General McRae is buried relatively close to Moore Street, and so when you drive down Moore Street, this thing in the evening, if you're driving in the right direction there, that just really captures your attention out in the cemetery. That the gold lettering on there really shines.
Right across the street from the fire club.
Right across the street from the fire plug.
Remember that?
There's the fire plug. There's the fire plug right there.
One of the gentlemen in one of the meetings was talking about.
I just remember that, I don't know if it was dedication day or the day you did the Iron Cross thing, but one of the days, the person who lived right across here, was mowing their yard during our dedication, and trying to scream and yell over a lawnmower.
What's the fireplace story? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm lost.
It was one of the gentlemen in one of the meetings, we were talking about that, and he said, I said, about the grave. And he said, if you miss it, he said, it's right across the street from the fire club. I said, I said, if you miss that great big marker up there.
That's a good example right there of what that D2 does to those stones. See how white that is? I just sprayed it down again, and I changed the flag up too, but it had already started to turn like the stones in the background back there. But that D2, that actually killed the algae and stuff on there.
And this is that new does not hurt the stone, but it cleans
I
it.
think D2 is a fungicide, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's
$40 a gallon.
It's a fungus killer, but you don't have to scrub, do you? You just
No.
spray it. Just spray and forget, as they say.
It's the only known thing that they've got that actually will not hurt the stone. Even Dawn dishwashing liquid will hurt the stone.
And it gets better and better with that
Oh,
as
yes.
it rains on it.
Yeah, and these old military markers are made out of marble instead of granite, and they crumple easily. And this is the marker. McRae came here in 1849. He was a lawyer, county clerk, had several positions within the county. Became Brigadier General November 5th, 1862, being our county's only general during the Civil War. Fought all over Arkansas during the war. And then afterwards, during Reconstruction, he was involved in some activities. Let's just say he was still fighting the war after the war was over with. And the details of all that are in Muncie's book on the history of Searcy. He died in 1899. Moving on. Another marker put up in 2012 at the Gum Springs Fire Department about the action at Desert Bayou. This is about 5 miles southwest of Searcy on Highway
267.
267. This is one of the grandest. This falls into one of those. Well, if you're on the southern side, this falls into one of those wonderful lopsided battles in Civil War history. On July 8, 1864, a column of 221 men of the 10th Illinois Cavalry came to Searcy from Little Rock. And they set up camp at Desert Bayou on July 13th. Now, they had made the mistake of coming up once a month from Little Rock on the same day, 3 months in a row. Basically telegraphing to the Confederates when they were coming again. And so, 500 men, these were actually under command of Colonel Frank Gordon, but who was under command of General Joe Shelby, came from the north, probably from the Jacksonport area, footing it all night, day and night, to get to the location. And they, make a long story short, they attacked Shelby's men from 3 sides. Not Shelby, they attacked the 10th Illinois Cavalry from 3 sides at 4:30 in the morning. And as it says, 131 of that 221 were killed, wounded, or captured. And Shelby proclaimed the 10th whipped, routed, and scattered. And there's no reference whatsoever to any Confederate getting a scratch. Not a scratch.
This is about a mile from the actual site, but we had to use the Gum Springs Cemetery. That was the closest public parking we could find. Obviously, you have to have a public pullout for these sites.
If you know where that highway crosses Desert Bayou right there, the bridge itself even is curved, and it was just an unsafe place to put up a marker and have people park. So the Gum Springs Fire Department was an excellent second choice.
But wasn't there a cemetery there at that campground at that time?
Thank you for bringing that up. There was, in the process of the research, we discovered a cemetery that we thought should exist, should exist, and it turns out a couple of markers survived. The cemetery was actually destroyed by farming activity, but a couple of local citizens there had fragments of markers, and it turns out one of the markers is the daughter of
John or William Magnus.
John Magnus,
The older
who
one,
was
yeah.
the first Anglo settler in White County. So this would make this young lady the first Anglo child born in White County. So we found her burial.
We say that because the Magnuses always claimed that they came, and this was to the Mount Pisgah area in 1818, came out of the Batesville area. And this daughter, Louisa, was born like 1819 or 1820. So it's assumed that she was the first birth in the county. And then she marries Crawford Walker, who is the son of the most prominent landowner, politician, the early bigwig in White County out by what we call the between Floyd and El Paso, was John Walker. I have trouble. Crawford's daddy was John Walker. I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, this very early Walker settler. And so his son marries Louisa. So it's two of the most prominent families marry 1840s. And then the son dies, Crawford Walker dies of cholera on a steamboat. But his body is brought back and is buried in this area. It's more or less this lost cemetery.
And it's interesting, the two markers that have been found, even though they're broken, the wording in them is really sharp because they were buried for so long. And we're speculating, but I think it's reasonable. We know that that cemetery was located precisely where the Union was encamped around, And as they were being fired at 4:30 in the morning, and the bugler sounds to horse, in the chaos of being shot at from three sides, as they tried to mount their horses and others just fled in the darkness, they knocked those stones over, and they were buried for 150 years, 130 or 40 years anyway.
And it's probably just a small family cemetery.
Right.
That may have been the only two graves there, or anyway, it was not a large cemetery for sure. West Point.
Naval combat at West Point marker. This is put up at the fire station. This is the fire station at West Point, and the Little Red River is just across the highway.
You're looking down 36 going to Georgetown to eat catfish.
Mr.
What you been doing?
Where's Mr. Langford? Is he not here?
No.
Mr. Langford likes to point out to me that he was involved apparently as a young man on paving this road from Kensett all the way to wherever 36 goes, and then it has never had to be repaired. Okay. The U.S. gunboat Cricket steamed up the Little Red River August 1463, hunting the Confederate steamboats Kaskasky and Tom Thug. She captured them at Search and Landing, destroying the pontoon bridge. The flotilla steamed down the river. 500 Confederate cavalry led by Colonel G.W. Thompson attacked. Thompson was also under the command of General Joe Shelby. The Confederates, the Kaskaskia's Union pilot at that point was wounded, and Confederate troops tried to board her, but were repelled, literally at bayonets. The Union had loaded cotton bales around the deck of these captured boats. So the Union troops were hiding behind those cotton bales, and the water was real high, it was at flood stage, and so there were some soldiers on the bank. After the pilot was shot, the boat starts drifting out of control, and it gets next to the bank, and some of the Confederates were literally about to leap onto the boat when all of a sudden about half a dozen bayonets lay right out in front of them, and so they didn't jump. Anyway, the Cricket was firing at the cavalry. They were not firing at the town, because none of the Union officers' reports mentioned the town at all. But they were firing at those 500 Confederate cavalry, and a number of their artillery rounds, which were the canister shot, landed in the town and hit several houses in the town, and so houses are damaged and destroyed. I say destroyed, but damaged, and I think one of them stood at least through the 1950s, if not later, that still had the cannonball damage.
Other side of the same sign.
Yes.
That's the curve at West Point right there behind the sign.
And the Cricket was the Union gunboat that had come up the river, and the Lexington was a larger gunboat that came up to find the Cricket because it had been gone so long, but that was because they had captured these two boats. The Lexington had 8 8-inch guns, and as the Confederates gathered to shoot at that thing with small arms, they opened up and fired 18 rounds, and the Union officer actually says, we must have gave them a scare as such they never had before, for they left very suddenly. Not many killed or wounded here. A major is killed, but this was a part of the Union attempt to capture Little Rock. They knew there were these two boats up, the Confederate boats up the Little Red River. So this was the naval engagement while the Yankees were capturing Little Rock. When we get to our last one here, this was most recently, just this few weeks ago, we put up the marker at the Henry Morris House, the 1860 Henry Morris House. Beautiful, amazing, great weather for the dedication day. The Henry Morris House, like I said, was built in 1860. There's a cabin back here behind that may have actually predated that by a year or two. And the cabin has been restored. but the house was opened by the Morris and Street families to the public on dedication day. And Henry Morris, well, there's two really significant neat documents here that don't show up anywhere else in the state together that we know of. One is that the Union soldiers were taking everything they could from the farms of the Confederates because their supply lines back through to Missouri were constantly being under attack, and so they were taking things from farms. And Mr. Morris's farm was stripped of a lot of his food and provisions and that sort of thing. And Mr. Morris goes to Colonel Osterhaus, who was commanding the 3rd Division. That's roughly about 3,000 men. Mr. Morris goes to him. We don't know what he says. Awfully brave. Goes to the colonel, and does he politely ask? Does he demand? How does he say, stop taking stuff from my farm? And Colonel Osterhaus issues an order, which his quartermaster writes out, that no more food, forage, or provisions shall be taken from the home or property of Mr. Henry Morris. And the Morris family still has that piece of paper today, signed by the quartermaster. Now, and then Henry Morris, later in the year, comes to the White County Courthouse and swears out a list of his property losses, 50 acres of corn and wheat and oats, and like 1,300 pounds of bacon and 300 pounds of lard, and just all kinds of things that were taken from him. And a total of $1,737. That would be an awful lot for 1862. And of course, Mr. Morris then follows up and joins the 8th Arkansas Cavalry and fights to the end of the war. Mr. Morris survived the war, only to die when a mule kicked him on the farm in 1868. And the family story is that he was mortally wounded by that kick from the mule, and then he actually died in front of the fireplace in the home. Thank you very much.
Like I said, Memorial Day is a little bit difficult to find a speaker, and I thought a lot of you may not know about the markers we've put up over the years in the county. This kind of covers some of the high points anyway. You get into a debate on what you do. Memorials are different than markers, because memorials are simply listings of, I'll use the veterans examples that B.B. and Mac Ray listing. It honors people, but really nothing happened there. And so I'm kind of drawing a distinction in my mind between a memorial and a historic marker, which is actually marking a site where something happened. But anyway, so we had some of both. And I'm proud of what the county and what the society's done over the years, and even the earlier ones. So,
and does anybody think of any that we missed? Because it's very possible.
There may be some markers that we didn't, because this was done in kind of a hurry. And if you think of it later, let us know. This may evolve into something else. Because of weather, I am going to dismiss this as quick as I can. Next month, Adele Woods wrote articles for the Penguin paper, Little Red Journal, these folks called, back in the early 80s. And they've been combined in a book 10 years ago, this June. Their daughters came and sold the books as a fundraiser for Philadelphia Cemetery, where their parents are buried. And they gave one of the best programs we ever had. They're both good readers, and they just read some excerpts, and so they've reprinted the book. This time it's going to be in hardback, going to cost $20, but it's a very, to me, it's worth it. And so anyway, that's the June program coming up. I think it'll be an excellent program. And then in July, the Titan Missile 2, I keep wanting to say explosion, but really fire. Gary Lay is, only 2 people survived that fire. And Gary Lay was a young man, 18 years old. Other man was older, and he's since passed away. Gary Lay is the only survivor of that fire still living, and he will be our July program. And so we're into 2 really strong programs, I feel like. So I want to encourage you to pass the word on June and July. I think we'll let's make some progress in. Hope the weather improves. Yes,
How
ma'am, Miss
many,
Mary.
do you remember how many people showed up at the May, opening?
Oh, I meant to tell that, Elizabeth was sick tonight. Open house, the 1st of May, we had, over 1,600 on the 2 days. And she's got a breakdown, I want to say 1,104 and 500, but I'm not sure. Anyway, Saturday, weather was perfect, it went great, and appreciate everybody that helped on that. Elizabeth normally gives us a report, she called, said she just, I don't know what, but anyway, she was not doing it all well.
Bugs going around.
Yeah, so, but anyway, so appreciate that also. Thank you, Mary.
It was here, Bill, they had it here last week, the bug, but they quarantined Hardy Place last week.
Oh, really?
25.
My goodness. Well,
Appreciate you fellas doing this.
well, it was a fun project.
Thank you, thank you. And I just wanted to say that earlier during our board meeting, my phone goes ding, ding, ding whenever there's severe weather. There was 5 counties under tornado warnings, and all of those have been lifted. We are gonna get some heavy rain, but
Well,
tornado,
tornado.
all the tornado warnings have been dropped.
That's
As
good.
of now, so, okay. But anyway, we're still gonna dismiss a little early. Thank you much.
Thank you.